If it is or if it ain't, it's gonna come out.
Good morning, everybody. It's your girl Miracle Sims, and you are listening to God, Sex, and Love, your daily dose of inspiration and juice. It is April the 20th, 2022, and today the topic is crumbs. I hope that you all had a great day yesterday. Mine was just fine. Spent some time with the fam yesterday. Saw my mother and my sister and my niece and everything like that. I'm pretty sure I might update you all on the goings ons. But as of right now, let's just say we had a good little time yesterday. Spent time with them, had breakfast, all that good stuff, and yeah, man, to God be the glory. Speaking of that, I meant to write down the gentleman's name so I wouldn't mess it up, but I didn't, so here we are. But shout out to the gentleman in our hometown, Mr. Mack, for blessing me and my family with that breakfast yesterday morning. That was unexpected, but greatly appreciated. So shout out to him. And yeah, man, let's get into this conversation of crumbs. Crumbs. So basically, I did my prayer and meditation this morning, and it kind of was centered around basically that God has abundance of resources, right? But we kind of only accept or go for the crumbs versus what all he could do for us, basically. And so as I was reflecting on that, the word crumbs stood out to me this morning. And so there's a couple of accounts about crumbs that I'm familiar with that are in the Bible. So I guess I was kind of led to both of those, and then here we are. So that's where the inspiration came from for today. But yeah, so first let's start off with the definition of crumb. So the definition of crumb says a small fragment of bread, cake, or cracker. And the second definition says a very small amount of something. So yeah. When you think of the crumbs and when you think of something real small, it's like, oh, you want more than that. You know what I'm saying? You might want your whole cake, right? You don't want just the crumb of the cake, right? I mean, I guess in most cases, right? But I don't know. I feel like as I was reflecting on this word today and as I was reading these verses and whatnot, it didn't seem like it was too bad to have, to desire the crumbs. And I'll tell you what I mean. Basically, I ended up going deeper on both of the accounts that came into my mind. Obviously, the account about Lazarus and the rich man, and then also the account with the Canaanite woman. I believe I'm saying that right. That desired for her daughter to be healed from the devil, right? Both of those accounts were mentioned crumbs, and mentioning desiring the crumbs, and yeah. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the Canaanite woman, because that's where some of my I guess impression of this idea comes from. But let's see what the Bible has to say. Let me read that first. So Matthew 15, 24 through 28. Now, again, if you read the entire Matthew 15 like I did, that's cool. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you'll get the full picture. But basically, what's going on around those verses is that the Canaanite woman was following Jesus and the disciples, and I guess calling out to him, so much so where the disciples decided to ask Jesus, "Hey, man, tell her to be quiet," basically. And so this is what happens at that point. Matthew 15, 24 through 28. But he answered and said, I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. Let me pause right there. Let me pause right there. I say I got two people watching. Listen, y'all tell me how y'all feel. Like, say this was you, right? And you like, Lord help me. And he say, hey, it ain't good for me to take what I got and give it to the dogs. Meaning you, right? Like, what would your reaction be? Right? I think most of us would probably be offended, especially these days. Oh my goodness. Like, definitely would be offended. Probably would call Jesus all kinds of names, right? and man, I don't know. Like, reflect on that, right? Right. So, what would we do in this type of situation? But let's see what she did. Check it out. This is what she said. It goes, and she said, "Truth, Lord. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table." Again, next level. That's next level thinking right there. to even respond in that way, right? A few questions came into my mind as I was reading that, just that part. One was like, why did he address her that way, right? Now obviously I believe he addressed her that way because he knew what she was gonna say. That's me and my personal opinion. But it still was like a test of sorts. It was still a test of her faith for him to respond in that way because, she could have, right, do what we would do and responded negatively. She could have went off. She could have got offended. She could have did a lot of different things. But for her to respond the way she did, I believe that it was one of those situations where he knew what she was going to say. So he just kind of put it out there like, hey, something about the dogs. She responded the way she did, and this is how he responded to her at that point. He says, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto you, thee, even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. So this is where I get my little perspective that maybe it ain't too bad to desire the crumbs, right? Because if your faith is so great to desire the crumbs, it made her daughter whole, right? It made Jesus, I would say, proud, or I guess proud of her. You know what I'm saying? Out of all the times in the Bible that he was saying, little faith, little faith, little faith, right? But of her, he said, great is thy faith. So I don't know. It might not be too bad to desire crumbs. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Because her daughter was made whole. He wasn't even like, it don't have any account of him going to the daughter and doing anything. It was like, because of your faith in this moment, your daughter is healed, and that's huge. Like, when you really, really think about it. So that's something to reflect on right there. The other account about crumbs that we're gonna chit chat about today is about Lazarus, right? So Luke 16:20 through 21 says, and there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. Let's pause right there. So if y'all not familiar with this account, basically what's going on is that Jesus is telling them about like Lazarus and the rich man. There's this rich man, he's dressed in finery, well, eating well, all these different things. And there's this man, Lazarus, this beggar, full of sores at his gate, desiring to have just some of the crumbs from this man's table. Now, in the account, it's talking about that they pretty much pass around the same time. When Lazarus passed, he goes into like the bosom of Abraham. When the rich man passed, he basically finds himself in hell. So, but the rich man can see Lazarus over there in Abraham's bosom. Now, the interesting thing I found here, like as I was reading on, the verses that stood out to me as I was reading the account is verse 25. So again, it's Luke 16 and then verse 25. It says, but Abraham said, son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and Lazarus evil things. but now he is comforted and thou art tormented. Because basically, in that moment, or before that moment, the rich man sees Lazarus over there with Abraham, and he's like, "Hey, Abraham, can you send Lazarus over here to give me a drop of water from his finger or something like that?" And now, one thing I found interesting this morning is that Lazarus didn't say nothing. Like, Lazarus didn't have to say nothing in this. He didn't have to respond or nothing. I guess he just was living in his lap for luxury at that point and didn't even have to respond. Abraham was doing all the responding to the rich man. So that's one interesting thing I found, or that I reflected on as I was reading it this morning. So that was interesting. Then it was interesting that, so the rich man wanted Lazarus to bring him a drop of water, right? But the man was at your gate all that time and wanted crumbs and had all these swords, and nobody showed mercy but the dogs, apparently. You know, the dogs that licked the man's swords. So it's just interesting how we want, right, what we don't give. Ooh, that might be Pope, but I'm just telling y'all what came to me this morning. And I mean, you know, so we might need to check ourselves. I'm just saying. And I'm included. I'm not just pointing no fingers here. I'm talking about me too. You know what I'm saying? We might need to kind of humble ourselves, check ourselves while we here, right? Because, yeah. So that's one thing that stood out to me. Verse 25. So then verse 31 stood out to me as well. So he goes on, like the rich man is asking Abraham. He's like, "Hey, well, send somebody back to tell my brothers, you know, and everything like that." And this was the response. Well, basically, Abraham pretty much says that, "Hey, man, you know, they got Moses and they got the prophets." And then the guy's like, "Well, nah, like if somebody else comes, like if somebody basically comes from the dead, that they would receive the information, X, Y, and Z." Check out what Abraham says. Verse 31. So this is, again, let me go back. It's Luke 16, verse 31. And he said unto him, "If they hear not Moses and the prophet, neither will they be persuaded through one who rose from the dead." Ooh. Ooh. Okay, so so this might be Pope on several levels, because, and I say something you don't like, right? This might be Pope or something you don't like on several levels, because one, he's talking about obviously the situation of like, hey, you know, if we send Lazarus from the dead, that, you know, if they're not being persuaded by by Moses and the prophets that are there, telling them already, then they're not going to be persuaded by one that's raised from the dead. But then that's crazy too, because what was that on Sunday? When that just Resurrection Day? So I was reflecting on that this morning, because I was like, ooh, so that means, you know, because some of us aren't persuaded by Jesus right now. And was he not raised from the dead? Actually, on top of that, I came across a quote. Was it yesterday or Monday? I don't know, one of those days. I came across a quote, and it was saying that Judas was with Jesus the whole time, but his Lord and Savior was still like money. That's crazy too. Listen. I'm just telling y'all what I came across this morning, man. That's my little my little study about crumbs this morning. I hope that encourages you, inspires you in some way. By all means, check out the Go Deeper section. You know, peruse it and let it marinate on your heart, souls, and minds this morning. Because, yeah, that's the juice, y'all. That is the juice. The Bible verse of today is James 1:2-3. It says, "My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." Friends, I hope you all enjoyed this juice this morning. Thank you so much for listening to God, Sex, and Love, your daily dose of inspirational juice. I pray you guys can go forth and have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you all tomorrow, if the Lord's will. Bye-bye.
This has been brought to you in part by Anointed Touch Health, Fitness, and Beauty. Eat right and exercise daily. Walk with God, run from the devil. 1 John 20:20, you have an anointing from the Holy One. Visit anointedtouch-hfb.com for more information.